We are going to be talking about creative financing like you've never heard before. I am with former Special Forces, Army Special Forces, lending master when it comes to creative financing, thinking out of the box, Brett Clark. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And thank you for your service, Army. I'm just blown away by anybody that does that, and especially when you're in the Special Forces and the elite.
Well, yeah. And you know what, to be honest, I'm grateful that I did it because it's driven a lot of, you talked about mindset as being something that we enjoy to talk about. Yeah. And I really think that having that time of putting yourself through crazy situations just drives mindset to a different level than your average everyday Joe.
You're not the average everyday lender either. If you talk about driven, you're master's from North Carolina, University of North Carolina. You've got a certificate from Harvard. You're extremely educated, way beyond a typical lender. How does that help you relate to your clients and help them get what they need?
Well, I always think that, like, from my side, the more information that I have, the better that I can reduce it down to little knowledge nuggets for other people. And so when I looked at just financing, I've learned about branding and all of these different things because that's what we always look at. And I was like, I don't necessarily want to just be the other lender guy. I want to be the solutions guy. I want to be the person that it's like, crap, I don't know how this is going to work. And really, when you look at special operations as a whole, that is what we are. We're not the conventional army that just goes and occupies. We're the behind the scenes doing stuff that we never talk about. And so I feel like that's kind of what I brought into lending. And I think that that's what UNC kind of teaches inside their MBA programs is how to be unique and stick out. And so I think that everything that I've done is kind of played into that.
And I actually just realized I did a poor job of introducing you. You are a podcaster and an author most recently. So congratulations on that.
The author thing is still new. I don't know how I feel about it yet.
Is the ink still wet?
Right.
Yeah. So that was a great undertaking. And I wanted to get to the story of how that came about, because that gets back to the mindset. Yeah. So let's talk about what the book is about and why real estate agents want to read this.
Yeah. So the book is The Non-QM Edge, the Realtor's Playbook for Creative Financing, the Realtor's Playbook for Closing More Loans. I went through a couple different shifts with title, Closing More Deals. The reason that I tiled it as is and put non-QM on front is because most realtors are going to look at it and be like, well, what the hell is that? What's non-QM? We have no idea. Some people that have been in the industry for a long time are like, oh, subprime. And we're like, no, we're not subprime. We're completely different. So kind of the idea behind that was getting back out there and introducing creative financing that is still beneficial for the client. I think a lot of us can agree that subprime was not always beneficial. And that's kind of where the book came from, is reintroducing, re-educating on a creative, better way to close more deals.
Often I think of creative financing as hard money lending, where you're paying points, massive points, and outrageous or inflated interest rates. And that's not what this is, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I always see it as kind of steps. Whereas your conventional or your qualified mortgage, your QM loan, right, is you're backed by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the VA, FHA, something like that, very confined, very constricted. And then the Federal Reserve or the US Treasury or your mortgage-backed security is running that. Then those, what everybody thinks of for rates. When you get non-QM, you're in private equity space. So you're not yet hard money. You're still in private equity. So you've got people like Goldman Sachs or Long Run or SG Capital or some of these big Wall Street gurus that want to get in and diversify their portfolios into mortgage-backed securities as well. And so they can write their own guidelines because it's a portfolio product for them. And that's really the differentiation. You're not full hard money. You're not paying all the points. You're not doing something crazy. You're still in this confined space where Goldman Sachs might want a little bit more risky, but still secure mortgage-backed security.
Now, why is this important to a real estate agent?
The biggest thing is because more and more people are going to gig work and self-employment. I mean, I feel like we're seeing this mass exodus from your conventional work, right? They don't want to be corporate people anymore. And they're going out and then they're getting turned down over and over again because they've learned self-employed means tax write-offs. I think that's great. However, we have to remember that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, semi-government subsidized. If the IRS isn't going to make their money, then Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac want their money. And so it's
Right.
kind of going back and forth with that government subsidy. Whereas on the flip side, helping people and investors continue to grow and get the tax write-offs and have that benefit of being self-employed or gig work and out of corporate. I really think that that's why realtors are having so many no's, is because there's so many self-employed people or so many investors that don't qualify for that conventional loan anymore.
Yeah. When I'm dealing with a buyer and they're self-employed, it's a big, right? Because I know that it's a process. It's a bunch of paperwork. It's back tax returns. It's grinding.
Right. And some of the big thing for us too is like you take your successful business person, and a lot of them have 3, 4, 5, 6 businesses. And so we're looking at K1s, 1020Ss, your S Corp documents for all of these businesses and running all of these analysis. Whereas bank statement's going to be like, give me 12 months of bank statements.
Right.
Here's your income. And so for your high net worth person, we're not even going to mess with what the IRS is saying. We're going to say, look, here's your bank statements. This is the income we're going to use. And generally speaking, it's higher than what they would have gotten if we would have gone through every K1. So not only did they save tons of time, but they're getting a higher income value.
Interesting. How does that work?
So I had a guy, this is one of my favorite stories, guy that's in the trades. And in the trades, there's a lot of like buying tile or something like that. We're going to go cost of goods sold. And so his revenue was 500K, but after write-offs, cost of goods sold, depreciation, all that kind of fun stuff, his bottom line was like 50K.
Right.
And so on the flip side, so on a conventional side, we're like, well, you got 50K a year as your annual income. And that's it. On the bank statement, we're like, well, we can show 500K. We're going to apply this standard 50% expense ratio, and we're going to give you your income of 250 a year.
Wow.
And you've now changed from don't qualify for the house or only qualify for much smaller than you want to potentially having a 20% debt to income ratio. And you're way less risky. And in my opinion, we're showing an accurate portrayal of it.
Yeah, cash is what matters, right?
Right. And that's why I like it. Really, rates aren't even that big of a difference. I think the average right now for 2024, I think I pulled my stat in November. The average rate was 6.3 for 2024, and the average non-QM was a 6.7.
Why does this sound new to me? I've been doing this. I've been in this business since 2003.
So nobody's really talking about it. I think everybody has a bad taste in their mouth from like subprime. I mean, if I bring up a reverse mortgage, there's a lot of people that are going to throw up in their mouth. Like, oh, reverse mortgage. We don't talk about that kind of stuff. Subprime has that same feel.
Yeah.
And all of the non-QM lenders that had retail forces have gone full just wholesale. So they're not on the streets educating anymore. So it takes the people like me that are passionate about something that nobody's heard about and get it back in the limelight. But we're at 5% of volume for the nationally right now. So we're picking up. It was like 1%. Now we're at 5% of the deals being done. It's still pretty small in comparison. But if you think about the trillions of dollars of loans that are done nationwide, it's still
yeah, it's a big number for sure. Why are you so passionate about this?
I think that I've always had a big thing of being a little different from when I was a kid to even right now. I want to be successful, but I want to do it differently than other people. And to be honest, for me, the conventional lending seems just a little boring. It's like, all right, cool. You're going to put 20% down. Here's your salary. Here's your pay stub. All right, cool. I'll talk to you in 30 days.
Yeah.
Whereas with what I do, I get to really dive in, like, what kind of ROI are you looking for? Like, what are you looking to do with your finances into the future? Oh, you're self-employed. What do you do? And I think I've learned a lot about how to run a business from talking to self-employed people. And I think that that's why I get excited about it. It's not just that mundane, boring, okay, cool. You've never bought a house before. Here's your pay stub. You can qualify for this. And it takes the transaction out of it and makes it relational.
It sounds like it's way more advisory on the whole financial picture for the people that you're serving.
Right. And I feel like it's a better service in the conventional space. Loan officers should be doing more of this advisory role, in my opinion, looking at mortgages and how does it fit into the financial picture of the buyers, as opposed to, this is the loan you want. I'm going to take an order like I work at McDonald's.
Right. Now, you seem to be you specialize in this.
Right.
Why isn't every agent doing this? So every lender doing this? Why is it so unique?
It takes more time. It takes more energy. I mean, I'm sure all of us can say it. We've seen it. We're going to talk about the online lenders that nobody wants to mention. And I'm not going to mention their names because you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Or the big name banks. Again, not going to mention them. That it's just a job for them.
Yeah.
They go to work, they work 9 to 5. They don't actually care about you. You're nothing but a number. And I think that they like that lifestyle. It's easy. And not everybody in the world wants to do something that, in my opinion, is going to have an impact.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say. We don't necessarily want to admit that, but not everybody wants to be an impact person on society.
What's driving you to do that?
I guess you could say drive for purpose. I also think that I was raised at a young age. We're going to go all the way back to when little baby Brett was running around, right? It's not going to be a long story, but little baby Brett, my mom would come in and I'd be like, Mom, I scraped my knee. It hurts. I want a Band-Aid. She'd be like, is it bleeding? And I'd say, no. And she'd be like, you don't need a Band-Aid. Mom, I'm sick. I can't go to school. Like the fake cough. And she was like, well, have you thrown up? Well, no, we'll go to school. And so I think that some of my drive comes from you have a duty to go and help somebody. Your job today is to make an impact, to have purpose. And so I think that my mom had a huge influence on being more than just the individual, being more than just the fish in the stream. You have a duty and a job to help other people. And if nobody else is going to do it, somebody's got to, right?
Now, was that intentional on her part, or did she just want you out of the house?
How? Who knows? At that point in time, she might have had to go to work, but that's just how she was built too, And nowadays, we'll throw Band-Aids on anything. I've got 2 kids. Be like, Dad, my knee hurts. And I'll be like, well, if I put a Band-Aid on it, I don't have to hear about it.
That's right. Go away, kid.
Maybe I shouldn't do that as much because I'm not teaching the lessons, but I'm glad that I have that duty driven, that mindset to do something different.
So let's talk about this book and its trajectory from thought to publication. When did you have an idea you wanted to do this?
So I'm going to say Tony Robbins and God kicked me in the backside. It was a joint task force that I didn't know about. I didn't know that they were in cahoots. So I went to Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within live in November. And I had been struggling. There was a part of me that was like, if I fully dive into creative financing, am I going to lose my conventional business? Then I can't pay my bills. And you know how we all catastrophize. I can't pay my bills. Like, this isn't me. And then I was hiding from the person inside. Throughout Unleash the Power Within, Tony got me to, like, as he wants to say, get rid of the bullshit. Like, that's just the way that he talks.
Yeah.
And so in between that and thinking about it, it was very, very clear for me, a conversation between myself and God, you could say staged by Tony Robbins, of I'm going to keep giving you in life until you decide to fall into how I made you to be like this. Stop running away from it. And I'm going to continue to challenge you until you fall into who you are. And so I think that that's where the start of it came. I was like, oh, I'm this. And then when you get into a focus, you're like, all right, cool. I'm going to learn everything I can. So I went out to Amazon. I was like, all right, non-QM. And I realized that there was one book in all of Amazon. It was built for loan officers. So I got that, but there's just no content on it. And that's where the book came from.
So the idea was planted in 60 days ago, and you already had the book out?
Yep.
That's impressive.
Sleepless nights. Sometimes you work a lot longer than you think you're going to work. I will say AI is a beautiful tool that people aren't utilizing to its fullest potential. And I've talked to a lot of people that they're like, the concept of I'm going to be an author. I'm going to write next to a candlestick in the corner so my hand bleeds is not today. Like, that's not where we're at today. And I think that you're leaving so much intelligence on the table with not going out and using the tools available to crawl websites, to crawl the internet to get those concepts.
It's today's version of going to the library and taking out 100 books.
Right. Correct.
Or thousands of books, really. Yeah.
When I got into it, I was like, hey, I went to ChatGPT and I was like, hey, I think that this is what I should be doing with my life. And it was like, all right, cool, because it will talk to you like a person. And I was like, teach me everything. So it started polling, and like the articles were coming from Rutgers, from different websites, lenders that I broker through, their fax pages, giving me all the details because there wasn't a book for it. And then at that point in time, I was like, I feel like I've been doing non-QM. I've been doing these loans for the last 3 to 4 years. I just didn't realize that there was a void of information. And so we're going from information doesn't exist. I have a calling that I feel like I have now. How can I get the information out there?
That's phenomenal. In 60 days.
Yep.
So at the moment when you heard this message, what was what was your emotional state when this came to you? This intrigues the heck out of me.
Now, I'm going to say for anybody that hasn't been to Tony Robbins, he puts you in a state that you've never, I mean, I had never really been in. He calls it the beautiful state. He just gets you energized where when I left that 4 days, I felt like you could not take me down. Like I felt like walking out into the airport in New Jersey that I could literally attack anything in the world and it'd be successful. And so that was kind of the state I had. And really, it's rooted in just belief in myself. And then I just got to work.
And you were hard to get in touch with during that time. Initial days.
I was, yeah. And I kind of just went out. I probably worked 8 to 9 hours a day on the book for probably a week and a half.
Wow.
And that was content writing, right? Like doing the research, writing the content, writing the chapters out. And then formatting was a whole different beast altogether because I'd never written a book.
Right.
So I had no idea how to go in and create a manuscript. So that was a whole different learning aspect that I had to do.
You must have felt possessed. That's what it sounds like to me. You were possessed to get this thing done so quickly.
Yeah. I felt, but you could say the possessed, yeah, 100%. I can't argue with that in any way, shape, or form. But also, I was so like duty bound. I was like, this is a good idea. And as I got the manuscript out and presented it to some of the realtors in our area, here in the Raleigh area, they were like, hey, Brett, this isn't just a good idea. This is a need for the industry. Right. And I think that made me feel even stronger about I need to push this faster than potentially I wouldn't have been because of that need of what's going on. I mean, lending's not getting any easier.
Right.
Rates aren't going down really anytime soon. So being creative, I think, is one of those things that we have to look at. How do we still help people do what they want to do inside of real estate? Or we can go broke. Either one.
Right. Now, is there looking at this from our realtor standpoint, real estate agent standpoint, is there a reason to steer away from the traditionals when you're dealing with somebody that does have a W-2 job, or is it straight up only for people that are independent with their own companies?
So one of the lessons I learned in business school was that there are needs for a company, like must-haves for a company, and then there are luxuries. And generally, when you choose something, you're not actually choosing it on baseline needs, you're choosing it on luxuries. When you look at Southwest versus Delta or Airbus versus Boeing, all of those airplanes get you from point A to point B.
Yeah.
At that point in time, you're now managing luxuries. Do I want the extra leg room? Do I want the TV? Do I want the internet? Do I want to be able to choose my seat? Because Southwest doesn't have that. These are all luxuries that you either care or don't care about. I view conventional lending as that necessity. Everybody, and if they're a loan officer and they can't get you through a conventional FHA, VA, USDA loan, they probably shouldn't be licensed anymore. But the luxury of somebody like me or any creative lending person that likes this stuff across the nation is that they're now the Boeing or the Delta or the whoever it may be, Qatar, airlines.
Yeah.
When we think about the fancy stuff. So I think that's the big difference. You would never go to a lender that can't do a conventional loan.
Now, when someone comes to you, are you looking, how do you assess their situation to go one route or the other?
This is what I do. And I actually recommend this for all loan officers. And I guess you could say realtors is I will never give somebody an application until I've talked to the client on the phone for 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes, or had a text conversation with them. It's not oh, hey, cool, you're a new client. Here's my application. Send them to the link. For one, you're going to have certain people that know their credit score isn't good or know their situation is crazy. And you're going to be like, let's not do a hard pull credit hit.
Right.
Because you're now saving them the hardship of you're going to spend an hour on this application or 20 minutes on this application. And you and I both know from a 5-minute conversation that's a waste of your time. So that's one recommendation I give to everyone is please jump on the phone call and understand. But I always assess somebody from the cheapest. Conventional loans are always the cheapest, rate-wise, fees-wise, whatever it may be. And so I start there for that conversation. And I kind of evaluate, where's your credit score at? What's your income look? Are you hourly? Are you salary? And then I can start weeding out problems. I mean, we probably have, if you were to scroll down our solutions, I like to call them solutions to the programs, we probably have like 918 or something like that, 1,000 different mortgage products that exist. And so it's like, how do you weed that out? And
Right.
you as a client, you as a realtor will never know that.
How do you do that? That comes in handy, right? Having all that education.
Yeah.
In a lot of people will say it's not the actual stuff you learn, it's how you learn to learn that matters. Do you see that happening in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you only want conventional stuff and you only pitch yourself as conventional, you're only going to know how to do conventional stuff. And so I think that that's a big piece of going at it. Like, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to pitch yourself at? And what are you willing to learn?
So how are you feeling right now? Are you
I'm pumped up. I love life right now. I
are
feel
you
like it's going to be amazing. I'm so excited.
I bet you got to be firing in all cylinders, I bet, right?
Well, and like my future is more books, right? This is the realtor book, but what about the investor book? What about the loan officer book? What about the financial advisor book? Because I know that I'm just one piece of all of those transactions.
That's right. It does tap into all those worlds. It'll be a complete rewrite.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I started drafting the investor book today. There are things in every area called a RIA, which is a Real Estate Investors Association.
Yeah.
In Raleigh, there's two. There's either TREA, which is the triangle, or there's the NC RIA, which is North Carolina, but they kind of go everywhere. My goal for 2025 is to jump back into being in front of investors again instead of just realtors. And so writing that investor one, I started that out, and all of my chapters are completely different. We're hitting completely different points. I would say the big thing is my intro is always going to be a why does it matter? So for anybody out there that sees my book, you got 2 pages at the very beginning, which is why does it matter to a realtor to read this book? And then book 2 is history. What is non-QM? How is it different from subprime? Anything like that. But the realtor playbook is literally a playbook on how do you increase your business with this tool in your tool belt, just enough to be dangerous. The investor book's going to be more about how do I utilize this tool to increase ROI and wealth? And so those chapters are going to be completely different.
Gotcha. On the real estate agent side, other than being aware that these products exist for the entrepreneur or the people that can qualify, how else can they use it? Can they actually go out and hunt for this type of business, or how are you proposing that?
Yeah, so absolutely. That is one of the chapters of the book, which is grow your business and create your brand. And one of the classes I really enjoyed was my intro to marketing. And so I actually have the ability to come in and write a chapter on here's non-QM, this is how it works. This is your business. This is how your business works. Let's pull them together. And so the last couple chapters of the book is actually how do I use the information in this to build your brand?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, and that's a really different angle, for agents, a whole new angle. I mean, everyone talks about waterfront, lakefront, condos, luxury, whatever that kind of niche, divorce. This is a completely different niche.
and I'll give you a cool insight too. We're here in North Carolina, so I'm going to use North Carolina as an example. And then I'm going to stretch out to Florida because I'm licensed in Florida as well. In North Carolina, if you are selling condos, right, and you're writing the MLS description, one of the things that you can ask about is, will the HOA allow short-term rentals? It's one of those things that hasn't been talked about for a long time. But when people are looking through Zillow or through the listing and they're an investor and they're looking at stuff and it says investor special short-term rental available. And so you're now being able to market to a different community instead of that person that just wants a beach house for a second home.
Yeah, coming from up north, the northeast where I was, finding a home of that size and that close to the water and having a cash flow, it's unheard of. You can do that in North Carolina.
Yeah. And then the other side of non-QM too is we don't have the same loan limits. So like for this year, I think we're just over 800,000 for the conventional loan limit. And then FHA is always a little bit lower than that.
Yeah.
And then you go into the jumbo space, which is a whole different beast. Everybody knows and everybody in lending will tell you if you go through a jumbo loan, you're probably going to hate it because they're going to ask and scrutinize everything. Even if we don't need tax returns, we're going to ask for tax returns. We're going to scrutinize tax returns. In the non-QM space, the maximum loan amounts might be 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. And so we're using the same conventional guidelines that we'd use on a $200,000 loan that we're using on a $3 to $4,000 or $4 million loan. And for the people in Florida, like Miami, some of them don't realize that $30 million condo that's in Miami-Dade on the beach will do a $15 million loan or a $20 million loan on it, and it will still cash flow. And so There are realtors out there that are only selling and pitching to a very, very, very small amount of people that can pay cash for a $30 million, $20 million condo or house. Whereas we're like, hey, we could finance 50 to 60% of this.
That's insane.
Yeah. And I think that that's why I kind of wanted to build that aspect of how are you going about these searches? And the big thing, Bigger Pockets has done a really good job of creating a nationwide investor community. And because of that, more and more people are interested in creating these Facebook groups. I think just in Raleigh, there's definitely more than 100 investor specific Facebook groups. And so realtors aren't looking for those naturally, but you can input yourself into that and just see what people are talking about. If you're only in the real estate mastermind, you're only going to see the really bots right now talking about what something is and then everybody infighting. Whereas the investors are talking about ROI.
Yeah.
Which group do you want to learn from?
Yeah. Where's the education?
Right.
Do you work with foreign money?
I can. Yeah. So foreign national, I don't really hit too much of it on the book. It's so nuanced. You kind of want to talk person by person on foreign national. But foreign national money is really no different than your DSCR funding, which is your investor funding. As long as there's cash flow, there's cash flow.
Okay.
And that's also a great place for realtors to look at. And I do a podcast episode on this, which is looking at the $1 million property and paying $1 million cash for it versus the ROI of buying $2 million properties at 50% down, $3 million properties at 33% down, or $4 million properties at 25% down each, and what appreciation looks like, what ROI looks like over 5 to 10 years, and being able to sell that to the foreign investors as well. Of like, hey, foreign investor, I know that you want to come and you're just going to dump 100K, but did you know that we could get you 2 properties instead of 1 with financing with these foreign national loans? Again, think about realtor commission on that. 3% on $1 million property or 3 million versus 3% on 2 $1 million properties. You just doubled your income with the same person.
Again, you got to realize that the viewer knows that everything's negotiable when it comes to commission.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm there that's going to get you in trouble, but I'm just throwing numbers out at you.
Yeah. No, that's phenomenal. And around here, we have so much foreign money coming in for investors in Raleigh area and around the country. That's how you can multiply their money over and over with the same amount of cash they're bringing in.
So I have an example of that one too. Lady from New York sold her, I think it was a triplex in Brooklyn. She had like $700K to spend. And instead of buying 1 property, she bought 4 $400K properties. All of them right now are broke even, but she bought them back in 2022. So I think they've all appreciated 10% already.
Yeah.
And so instead of getting 10% on that 400K, which is 40K, she's got 10% on $1.6 million portfolio.
That's brilliant.
Right. And so that's you're now an asset, right? That's where the realtors are missing some of the benefits of investors or the self-employed in general. Try to get them out of just a cash only buy. Yes, I understand it's easier. You're guaranteed income. You're not worried about lending or appraisal. However, in these situations, what more could you be doing to be an asset to your buyer?
Yeah. Phenomenal. I'm going through a list in my head of whom we're going to reach out to when I hang out and tell them to get this book. This is fantastic. And you mentioned the podcast. Tell us about that.
So podcast is, I got it on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple now. It's Beyond the Box, Unlocking Creative Mortgage Solutions. And the big key thing there is it's written for the loan officer and the realtor.
Okay.
So I'm not talking to the investor. I'm talking to the realtor. I'm talking to the behind the scenes of DSCR, the behind the scenes of bank statement. I mean, I do one on objections. How do you help compete with the objections of a higher rate or a higher fee? And so being able to use some of the things I've learned from the special operations community, the business school community, and in lending, working with my investors, this is one of those things that's assets for somebody. They're like, I think I have 2 above 10 minutes. Most of them are 6 to 9 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's like a car ride to Starbucks.
That's phenomenal. That's good to know. So you can tune in quick and listen and get a lot of info.
Every week. I'm pushing a new one out every single week. Yep, every Monday.
Good for you. What are you using for a platform real quick?
So I'm using Spotify for podcasters is what I'm putting it onto, but they have a really, really easy for anybody inside the podcast space. Spotify's really, really good at pushing out their RSS to Apple, Google, YouTube, everybody else.
And again, the name of the podcast?
Beyond the Box, Unlocking Creative Mortgage Solutions.
Beautiful.
And this year's going to be great because the first 11 episodes is just my voice, which can be monotonous for 6 minutes if you're not just for content. We're going to be bringing in people we're interviewing this year. So it's going to be great.
That's phenomenal. Very cool. I love what you're doing. I love your energy. For somebody who, your experience at Tony Robbins, can that be recreated without having to take that trip and go through Tony? What any ideas on how somebody can get that breakthrough?
Yeah, the big thing for me is being around people that are also motivated. I think the big thing for Tony Robbins Live was being surrounded by 17,000 people that also wanted to change their life for the better. And I've seen TikTok videos, I've seen YouTube. One of them that sticks out in my head is Snoop Dogg, and everybody laughs when I'm like quoting Snoop Dogg. But Snoop talks about how you start here, and as you rise, here's your friend base. And you've got two options. You can either wait for them to come to you, which almost never happens. You're going to come down to them eventually. You're going to get tired of being alone. And the only way to stay at this level is to bring yourself up. And I think that to recreate that mindset, that beautiful state that Tony Robbins talks about, is being surrounded by people that also want to improve their life. And that's one of the things where I actually think that realtors being in the office is beneficial. All the realtors that are doing everything from home, I think it's great. You have a busy life. I think it works for you. But the people in the office are generally the ones that are working towards something. And you're going to get ideas just from, oh crap, I heard so-and-so say this on the phone. That's a good idea. And so I think that recreating that in some of these brokerages, and even if you're with a small brokerage, being in a co-work space of people that are putting pants on and going to work.
And I agree, being face to face with somebody is absolutely huge. Often the people that are in the office are not those who you want to be hanging around with. So you really have to, like you said, you got to pick and choose who you want to be around with. And I find that agents that are more intentional are not necessarily hanging around with people that are in their own brokerage, and they found their own network of high achievers that they're swapping ideas with, they're going to lunch with, they're hanging out with. They're competitors in some ways, and in other ways they're helping each other get to another level.
That is one thing that I thought was interesting about the Realtor Association. So I've spent a lot of time in the Realtor Association. People would be like, you're a lender. Obviously, it makes sense that you're there. It's just a pool of people that could potentially send you business. But like you said, you're surrounded by competitors. And it's like competitors, but also collaborators.
Right.
And everybody there is somebody that has learned something. I mean, most of the people at Raleigh's Association have been in the industry for a long time. And so there are tons of nuggets. I mean, I don't do a lot of business with Linda Trevor, but the things that I've learned from her that have exponentially built my business just by being in her presence has been huge. So that's true. If your brokerage isn't doing it for you, because they're not necessarily the ones that are successful, there are real estate investors associations, there are realtor associations, there are mortgage associations, networking groups all over the place to be around people that are at or above your level.
Absolutely. And if there isn't, make it. Go on, get your own people together.
Yeah. And I also believe in coaching. So
100%.
You need an executive coach. Anybody that wants to be anything above mediocre, you need a coach, a business coach.
Why do you say that?
There's just so much that you're not going to be willing to tell yourself, regardless of what you think. Like, oh, I'm hard. I can tell myself the truth. There are certain things that you just won't.
Yeah.
And so having a coach that's willing to point out those things, or when you're feeling lonely, because growth can be lonely for a period of time, you've outgrown these group of friends, but you're not quite at these group of friends and you're somewhere in the middle and it's lonely. Having a cheerleader there that helps build you, like, hey, you're doing a great job. I coach 100 people and you're one of those ones that really stands out to me, can really make the lonely darkness bearable.
Yeah, coaching's huge. I have a coach. I wasn't into it for a long time. It's been recent years, and it was something I wish I had done sooner in my career. I had a coaching session this morning that I was the coach when I was coaching this person, and it really helps to have somebody coaching you along and asking those hard questions. And they're hard to ask. I mean, it's uncomfortable for me sometimes to ask those questions, and it's absolutely burning and for them sometimes to answer it truthfully. And it's
that's
fine.
Really where they get it. That's where they finally get the breakthrough of, all right, you asked me the hard question and I know you're going to sit here until I answer it.
And then the night before, you mentioned last night, he's like getting ready for today's meeting. He doesn't want to He doesn't want to not be ready. He doesn't want to disappoint. And I asked him, why is that so important? And it came down to, we were talking about time blocking. He said, today, he goes, I look at my calendar, I'm absolutely going to make the coaching session with Joe. I have time blocked after that at 9 o'clock to make phone calls. That he'll blow off occasionally. So I was like, why is it so important to show up for me? And when in reality, you're just showing up for yourself because you know you need this. And why is that not as important as making those phone calls? And it's just these little things that people do that we all do that we kind of self-sabotage along the way if we're not careful.
And that's that mindset piece that we've talked about in the past, right? Why is it that we will hold ourselves accountable for someone else, but we won't hold ourselves accountable to ourselves?
Right.
And so one of the reasons I think coaching is beneficial is because we won't necessarily hold ourselves accountable all the time. And so we almost need to have that duty for someone else. Oh, I've got to do this today because my coach said so.
Yeah.
But we're not doing it for ourselves. And so just like what you said, he'll never miss your appointment, but he could blow off phone, like call blocking or,
right.
That phone block. If we could learn to do that for ourselves, then maybe we wouldn't need coaching. But the people that are making those calls and are being honest to themselves and holding themselves accountable with their coach, they're working on something that's so far ahead of our league that we can't even fathom that conversation yet.
That's right.
Something else they want to work on.
That's right. Yeah. Brett, it's always fun talking to you. Yeah, you always pump me up. You always get me juiced. I got notes here of what I'm going to do as soon as I hang up for myself and for some agents that I know. It's always inspirational. You're one of those people that I want to hang around with to get that energy, and really appreciate you coming on the show. Any last words before we sign off that you'd like to share about your book?
I'm so grateful for that invitation that you sent me and highlighting the book that I have. I don't want to miss the moments where I can show gratitude and appreciation for other people and being able to help me get out there. And so again, just so amazingly grateful for that. Big thing for all the people out there is that I didn't write the book for me. I already know all the information in the book, but I am here to be a helpful colleague, a helpful mentor of any of those things. I always say that I'm not necessarily competing for your conventional stuff. You have your conventional lender. Give your conventional stuff to your conventional lender. And we can help you along the way, or I can help you find those creative lenders or make the questions to be able to vet out who your preferred people are inside that space. The book is just great, in my opinion, because not only is it making you dangerous with the product, but it's teaching you how to utilize the product. Every chapter has 3 action items at the end of the chapter as the recap. You'll see it in the table of contents when you get it. You could literally just go to the 3 action items of each one and grow your business. And so if anything, the playbook by itself could just give you a little bit more motivation or an idea that you didn't think about, whether it be SEO in your business or selling an investment property to an investor. There's so many different action items that you can take out of that book. And so don't just look at it as another book, but as truly something that you can leave on your desk and use as a resource.
Phenomenal. It's another thing I got to add. Buy the book. As soon as we hang up, buy the book.
One's built for a realtor. So it's really easy to see. Mine's the blue one.
Okay.
It's Hard Hill fan.
There you go. It should be. Go Bill Belichick, huh?
Right.
That's going to be interesting. All right. Be your best and have fun.
All right. Thanks.